This is Huawei's top-end flagship, the P60 Pro, and this is Samsung's best flagship ever, the Galaxy S23 Ultra. And today, they'll be going head-to-head against each other in this extremely detailed speed test. Due to certain restrictions, the Huawei is running a 4G version of the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 CPU with a max clock speed of 3.19 GHz, while the Samsung is rocking Qualcomm's latest Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 chipset with a max clock speed of 3.36 GHz as it's been customized for Galaxy. The Samsung is kitted with the latest LPDDR5X RAM and UFS 4.0 storage, while the Huawei houses last gen UFS 3.1 storage and LPDDR5 RAM. The Huawei also packs in less RAM at 8 gigs as opposed to the Samsung's 12 gigs. They have both been updated to their latest available software, and since they offer different animations, I've removed all animations on both devices. Which one of these incredible flagships has what it takes to come out on top? This is TechNick, and without further ado, let's find out. We're going to kickstart things off with a simple boot to see which one can power on quickest, and it is indeed the Samsung here with just over 20 seconds as opposed to just over 21 seconds on the Huawei. But going into the phone, refreshing the app icons, getting to the home screen, the Huawei outdid the Samsung here, both 1 point apiece here. Now testing out the fingerprint sensor, don't look at the icons or the transition over here, focus on the wallpaper, and the Huawei was quicker 2 out of 3 times there, picking up its second point in the first round here. Now testing out facial recognition, the Samsung kind of shows it first, but the Huawei unlocks first every single time. Best 3 out of 3, picking up its third and final point in the boot and biometrics section. Now I am checking the lux meter readings here to make sure they set to the exact same brightness levels so that we can get accurate battery drain levels at the end of the test. They are sitting at 70% on the Huawei, 71 on the Samsung. We'll compare this at the end. And in terms of degrees Celsius, they're sitting at around 30 degrees Celsius at the start. Once again, we'll compare this at the end to see how much they gained. Going into the first app here in the speed test section, round 2 over here, they were both equal at going into the clock app and going to the world clock and the stopwatch as well. No points were allocated within the first system app over here, but hopping into calculator, which one is it going to be? Is it going to be the Samsung or the Huawei? Going into that one, it is indeed the Samsung, picking up its first points in the speed test section over here. Now doing a simple calculation between the two, which one is gonna get the final result faster, and it was way too close to call, so no point was allocated over here. Now we're gonna be going into our third system app here, that being the camera app. We only have 4 system apps, and then we move on to rendering apps, and then we go to third-party apps. And going into the camera app, the Samsung picked up its second point. Flipping to the selfie cam, however, the Huawei picked up its first point, and taking the snap, the Huawei decided to pick up its second point here, since it saved the picture to gallery at the bottom left-hand corner quicker than that of the Samsung. Now going into gallery itself to find that picture that we just took, the Samsung picks up its third point going into gallery quicker, and its fourth point going into the actual photo we just took quicker than that of the Huawei. Now we're going into our first non-system app here, that being Photoshop Express, so that we can export the photo that we just took. The Samsung now has 4 points, the Huawei has 3 points, and jumping into the actual photo, the Samsung picks up its 5th point. Now we're going to be exporting both of them to gallery, and it was neck and neck there, literally exported at the exact same time as it showed at the bottom of their displays, so no point was allocated. Now going into Adobe Rush over here, a video editing app, which one can do it quicker. It is indeed the Huawei picking up its 4th point, and going into the project, this time it is the Samsung picking up its 6th point. Very neck and neck here, back and forth, but going and exporting this 4K 25 frames per second clip. In my last speed test video that I did where the Samsung went up against the Xiaomi, the Samsung took almost a minute to render and the Xiaomi took about 12 seconds. The Huawei now took just under 11 seconds with slower UFS storage as opposed to the Samsung, which did it in 49 seconds. And I did this multiple times, I kept getting the same result, so Samsung just does not really mesh or work well with Adobe Rush. Now going into Spotify, a music streaming app, hopping into that one, it is indeed the Huawei which picks up the points. It goes into the app quicker, and jumping into the song that we're currently playing in the background, the Huawei picks up its 7th point. Now for the first time, it is indeed ahead of the S23 Ultra. Jumping into Google Chrome over here, not exactly Huawei's forte. The Samsung picks up its 7th point. Now matching that with the Huawei and doing a simple search within Chrome, it was too close close to call. So both of them sticking with 7 points apiece in the speed test section, that being round 2 of the speed test. Now we're hopping into our first social media app, that being Facebook. Jumping into that one, it is indeed the Samsung, which pulls ahead here with its 8th point, now a point ahead of the Huawei. And jumping into my profile, once again, way too close to call. I did think the Samsung was gonna perform a lot better than the Huawei here, since it is using a much more improved next generation chip and next generation storage and RAM modules. But going into Instagram over here, the Samsung did indeed pick up its 9th point, and going to my profile, once again too close to call. Many too close to call situations over here between the Samsung and Huawei, though they did both release this year. The Samsung does have new tech in. And going into Twitter, once again too close to call. Hopping into my profile again, once again too close to call. I can't get over how close it is, but things are going to change pretty rapidly, as you'll see right now. Starting with TikTok, the Samsung picks up its first double-digit point, that being 10 points going into TikTok. Playing the video quicker and going to my profile, it was once again too close to call between the two devices. And jumping into our next app, that being YouTube. Now, of course, you can't get YouTube natively on the Huawei, so going into it, we're using a side-loaded app known as Gbox. It still gets in fairly quick, actually just behind the Samsung, but the Samsung did indeed pick up its 11th point because of that. And going into my profile, the Samsung picks up its 12th point, my channel that is. Be sure to check out more content of mine after this. Now, hopping into Netflix over here, it was extremely close, and it usually is neck and neck, but this time the Samsung picks up its 13th point, but going into a profile, it was way too close to call over there. Now going into our first benchmark of 2, we're starting with Geekbench version 6. Now I did replace my older speed test. I had Geekbench version 5, I've replaced it with version 6. They both went into it at the exact same time. Now we're gonna hit run CPU benchmark on both devices. And Geekbench version 5 usually takes about 2 minutes to complete. This takes about 5 minutes, so it does affect the battery drain within this video slightly more. The Samsung did finish more than 10 seconds quicker than that of the Huawei, and slightly higher single and multi-core, only slightly for a chipset that is new in this generation. Really good to see Huawei is still packing quite a fair amount of score over there. And now going into 3D Mark Wildlife Extreme, the Samsung went into the actual benchmark quicker than that of the Huawei, picking up its 15th point, now 7 points ahead of the Huawei. Wildlife Extreme is the same as regular Wildlife, but it renders at 4K, so it's a bit more strenuous. And now, even though the Samsung does pick up a higher score than the Huawei actually finished quicker. And since this is a speed test, it was indeed allocated the points over there, picking up its 9th points, just 6 points behind that of the Samsung. It's going to have to do something crazy with these last 4 apps, and they are all games. Going into our first not too heavy game, that being Subway Surfers, the Samsung came out on top of the Huawei here with just over 4 seconds as opposed to just over 5 seconds on the Huawei, picking up its 16th point there for the Samsung, 9 points still on the Huawei. Jumping into a slightly more demanding game, that being Asphalt 9 Legends, the Samsung did it in under 20 seconds, the Huawei did it in over 20 seconds. Samsung picks up another point over there. And hopping into the game within it, actually getting to play the game, the Samsung decides to go a smidge quicker, but just a little bit quicker than that of the Huawei, picking up its 18th point now. More than double, exactly double that of the Huawei P60 Pro. And going into our last 2 games of the 20 here, last 2 games of the 4, last 2 apps of the 20, hopping into Call of Duty Mobile here, does take a little bit longer to load than the previous games that we tested out. Just under 30 seconds for the Samsung, and we got almost 40 seconds on the Huawei. Samsung picked up its 19th point, now 10 points ahead of that of the Huawei. And jumping into the practice range over here, which one is going to do it quicker? This time it is indeed the Huawei P60 Pro, picking up its 10th point, but it is still 9 points shy of the S23 Ultra here, and they are very similarly priced devices. And we do have 4G with the Huawei, but the Huawei does take incredible pictures. The Samsung does as well. Make sure you check out one of my camera comparisons after this. Going into our last app here, our last game, that being Free Fire, the Samsung picks up its 20th point, once again double than that of the Huawei, and it picks up its 21st points, ending off the speed test section of this video with a more than double win over the Huawei, which is impressive to say the least on this beast of a Samsung flagship. Now we're going into the RAM portion of this video, and hopping into that one, they both kept Free Fire open. Now in terms of allocating points within this section, I do go in a reverse order. If they both keep the app open, no points is allocated. If they both kill the app like you saw right there, no points is allocated. That was Asphalt, by the way. Hopping into Subway Surfers, both of them kept it open, and going into 3D Mark, both of them kept it open. The only way they can actually get allocated a point is if one of them keeps it open and the other one kills it. So far far, they are going neck and neck, especially with YouTube. Surprised to see Huawei decided to keep that one open. But going into TikTok, something weird happened over here. It actually kicked me back, so I decided to go back into it, and the Huawei actually did close it and have to reopen. So the Samsung picked up its first points over there, but they did keep majority of the apps open together, that being Facebook as well as Google Chrome over here. They both kept my search there, and going into Spotify, they actually both killed it, so no point was allocated. Going into Adobe Russia, the Samsung kept it open, the Huawei killed it, so the Samsung picks up its second points in this section. Same with Photoshop over here, with the Samsung picking up its third point and its fourth point. Going into Gallery, where the Huawei decided to kill that. Now they both decided to kill the camera app over here, but they did save the last mode used. Going into Calculator, they kept that open, and they also kept the clock app open as well, ending this speed test off with a win toward the Samsung with a total score of 26 points as opposed to the 13 points on the Huawei. But I'm still impressed with the Huawei since it still stayed neck and neck with the Samsung, and it did better in terms of battery here with a lower milliamp hour per minute drain reading as opposed to the Samsung, which has a larger battery. But the Samsung did have cooler temps overall, which is always good to see. Now I am very impressed with the Huawei considering it stayed on par with the Samsung, which is using a new and more beefed up chipset as opposed to the Huawei using a last generation overclocked chipset, that being the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 CPU. They're both incredible flagship devices, and I love them both for different reasons, but at the end of the day, the Samsung still performs quicker in the speed test portion of this video. Let me know your thoughts of both of these devices as well as which one you prefer. Are you team Huawei or team Samsung? This is TechNick, and I'll catch you in the next one.